friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and it's been a long time since I've done a crochet video, so today I wanted to show you, since I'm already working on this project, what my favorite type of shell stitch is to use when I'm making scarves in particular. Now I do have other scarf patterns I've come up with, but this one I really like for just a standard scarf, especially anything that's going to end up like with a variegated yarn to kind of have stripes. This is a good one to use this on, or even your solid scarves. So I'm going to show you a few different pictures here, and where I originally came across this particular stitch pattern was on a baby sweater. It was a pattern I found for free somewhere many years ago, and I made that sweater. It was part of a full set that I put into a local auction for a good cause. I can't remember which one. I think it was for the Caring Place. I liked the way the stitch pattern looked so much that I then started using it to make scarves of various kinds. So now I'm going to show you a few images of some completed scarves with this pattern. A lot of these you'll see where I also added a hood to them to make a hooded scarf, and maybe one of these days I'll share how to do that. But today is specifically about the pattern stitch and how to get started, and to also figure out how many shells you want to make for whatever it is you're going to use this in. And by the way, if you're totally new to crocheting, or if you've never crocheted before and you're wanting to get into it, I recommend you go back to the first video in this whole series, Crochet 101, where I start off showing the very first thing you have to learn, and that is how to put the slip knot on your hook and then doing a chain stitch. And then I move on and break down some specific stitches from there, plus adding in some simpler projects for you to start with. And this is really one of those. It's pretty simple. Now let's talk a minute just about a shell stitch. A shell stitch is a basic name for anything that kind of comes out into a shell pattern, but it can have various different types of stitches in it, various different amounts of stitches in it. And this one is the most unique shell stitch pattern I had come across. And though there are times I do like a full or very full and fluffy shell stitch, and that would be using like maybe 7 double crochets in the same stitch, or even 7 triple crochets or treble crochets in the same stitch. All right, so to get started, what you need to decide is how many shells across you want on your scarf if you're making a scarf with this pattern. And in this case, because this is a much finer yarn than I usually work with, like this one here, I decided to go with 8 shells and a smaller hook than I usually work with. So for this, I'm using a J hook. Normally I go with a little bit thicker yarn and I use a K hook. That's just my preference. So the size hook and the type of yarn you use and the width of the scarf you want is going to determine how many shells across you want. So obviously, those of you who know anything about crocheting, we always are going to start off, there's 2 different types of foundations you can start off with. You can start off with a foundation single crochet. In this case I'm just using, because this is a scarf and I don't need this to be stretchy, I'm starting with just a regular chain stitch across. So what I need is 3 chain stitches for each one of these shells. So in other words, for 8 shells, 8 times 3 is 24 chain stitches, plus I need 1 more stitch, so what I need is a chain of 25. And then if I'm just doing 6 like I normally would, so 6 times 3 is 18, plus 1 more would be 19 stitches across. So now let's do the example using the solid. Just to keep this brief, I'm only going to do 3 shells across. And if you're wanting to have a fringe on your scarf and you're making a scarf all of the same yarn, whether it be solid color or printed, but you're using the same yarn through the whole scarf, including the fringe, go ahead and leave plenty of tail there so that you can work it into your fringe and not have to work that end in. So since I'm only doing 3 shells just for the demonstration, I need a total 3 stitches per shell. So there's 3, 6, 9, plus 1 more makes 10, because I need that extra stitch for that starting stitch. So whenever you're working off a chain, you always have to add extra here, because that's going to become your starting stitch. So I'm going to work into the 4th chain over. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's going to be a double crochet I'm doing. As you can see, I wrap the yarn, So these 3 chains here became the first double crochet. There's my second double crochet. I do 2 chain stitches, and then I do a single crochet all in that same stitch, that 4th stitch over. Then I'm going to skip 2 and then work that shell again. So a double crochet, another double crochet, 2 chains, and a single crochet. That's where you kind of get that unique look to the shell than you'd get from a normal shell. So again, I wrap the yarn over for that first double crochet, I skip 2, now I'm in my last stitch, so I had exactly the right amount of chains that I needed. 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and a single crochet. Then I want to do 3 chains for my starting double crochet on the next row. So that means I'm only going to do 1 double crochet into that space of the shell on the previous round, 2 chains, single crochet, and then for the next 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and a single crochet. Again, working into the space of the next shell, 2 double crochets, 2 chains, single crochet. Let me do 1 more row so you can see how it looks all together. I'm pulling my yarn out because it's kind of stiff, new skein. So I got my starter double crochet, so I yarn over for the next double crochet, 2 chains, single crochet. And yes, this is really me crocheting this fast. I'm not speeding this video up. Some people think I speed the video up, but I don't. This is just how I roll. Especially when working this yarn. I can work this yarn faster than that finer yarn. 2, and then add the last 3 chains for the next row. So you can kind of see what that looks like there in the solid color. This is such a pretty color. Okay, so let's get back to this one, the one that's in progress. And whoops, I just pulled some stitches out. Now I do work slower with this yarn because this finer yarn is just a little, you got to be a little more careful with it. It slips off the hook easier. It's just generally more of a pain. So there's my starter round. Now, as you can see, as I flip this over, I did have to start a new skein, so I have my join here. I'm going to go ahead and explain real quick the way I do my joins. I do them the standard way, as far as, you know, you leave that last piece of yarn, then you wrap the new piece on from the new skein, and then finish out your stitch. But when it comes to ends like this, especially when it ends up in a scarf, I hate this actually when I have to add another skein to the middle of a project like this. But what I always do is I always tie knots. I don't care what anyone says, I tie knots. I've learned from experience it's just simply the best way to go about it. Then I will actually crochet my ends in. I know I've explained this in another video, so I'll show you what I mean. Instead of just weaving the ends in, I crochet them in like this. I'll do that at least once on each end, and then I'll weave in the ends. And that will help lock it in much better, so it's less likely to come undone. And let me do this, since I work slower with this anyway, I'll do a few more stitches on this slower. So you can see I wrap, I've already got my first double crochet, I work into that space, double crochet, 2 chains, single crochet. And I don't, obviously in all the following rows, you don't have to work into a foundation row, so you're just working into the space left in the chain, or in the shell stitch, with those 2 chains. Chain 2 and single crochet. Let's do one more. So wrap, double crochet, chain 2, single crochet. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit. So that's the stitch. That was the main thing I wanted to show you. But I decided for this, because whenever I'm working with a variegated yarn where I've got a pattern going on, I prefer to put a fringe of a solid color on the bottom. And I decided in this case to go with a jade. So I looked for a jade that most closely matched. When I go to make that fringe, I get, you can see I went ahead and left a long tail there because at the time I wasn't sure when I started this what I wanted to do. So if you left a tail at all or you didn't, just get an idea roughly how long you want your fringe to be, and then add a little extra to it because you're going to need that. So lay that out, cut, and then I usually do approximately 6 pieces of yarn like this for each fringe. So it's 4. I don't worry if they're exactly the same length, just approximately, because I'm going to trim it anyway. Okay, so when you go to do this, try to make sure all your pieces are as even as possible. Now these weren't cut perfectly even, which I didn't care. It doesn't matter which end you're working on, you're just going to be sticking your hook through the chain 2 space of that shell. Either it's going to be the bottom of the chain 2 space, or in this end, the top of the chain 2 space. Pull up a loop with all of those, making sure your hook grabbed all pieces of yarn. Make sure it's basically fairly even down here. If you have one side that's much, the one whole side is longer than the other, try to even that up, and then pull that hook up far enough where you can get both your fingers through the loop. Then you're going to grab, make sure all your fingers are through all the loops, grab all pieces of yarn, pull it through, and then tighten it. And there you go. There's the first fringe. Since this is going to have 8 of these little tassels all the way across, I have to do this 7 more times. Then I lay it out, get it nice and flat, and then I'll trim it as evenly as I can all the way across. And that's how I do the fringe. So that's how I do that particular shell stitch pattern, and like I said, it looks really good in baby girl sweater patterns or in scarf patterns. I just wanted to show you real quick, this is the matching hat. I actually sell the pattern to this on my Etsy store, and I hadn't finished it yet because I was waiting for when I had decided when I got to the end of this, that was when I decided for sure I wanted to go ahead and get an accent color. So I'm going to be doing the border, this part, the band part, in the jade, and then finishing it out with this, which is why I left the yarn connected, because I don't cut the yarn until after I add that last bit in and then tie it all to work it all together. So the scarf is to go with this. I'll also be making a pair of gloves. The gloves I'll be making, I do actually show how to make them. I have a video just on that. So they're a shell stitch pattern. It's not the same shell stitch, but you could use that on those. But this one's a little bit different. I'll link to that video in the description box down below. But I'm also going to be putting that whole crochet playlist so you could find it in there as well. But I also have another fingerless glove pattern that is a tighter single crochet stitch that I sell on my Etsy store. So either one, in this case I think this will look good with the shell stitch pattern. A lot better than it would if I used a single crochet pattern. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, just another little stitch pattern. If you're liking to see more videos like this on specific stitch patterns, just let me know in comments down below and I'll do some more of these and then use those to make your own creations. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.